Hello everyone. Well, I hope you've been enjoying the series, and I just want to let you know that after this last part in the series, I have studio chat. So if you'll hang around for a few minutes, I have a couple of things to discuss with you. A pleasant night in Osage Hills State Park led to day 5 of our adventure. This morning, Mike would travel until our next gas stop, then turn towards his Colorado home. I would continue along the TAT to spend the night near the Arkansas border in Natural Falls State Park.
Go check.
Loud and clear, WRAN 924, loud and clear.
WRFB 498, clear.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 5 of the TransAmerica Trail, Oklahoma. We are departing our campsite in Osage Hills State Park. This morning I'm headed for Natural Falls State Park. Deer. This morning we are retracing the route that we took from the TransAmerica Trail down to the park. And we'll pick up the TransAmerica Trail exactly where we left off yesterday. Stay left, coming down that little hill. One lane bridge is down here, a little rough. Mike, do you have the route on a GPS, or do I need to make sure you stay inside of me?
Route, but I'll try to catch up with you in just a moment.
Yeah, I don't mind you getting out of sight as long as I know you're not going to get lost.
Appreciate that. Thank you. You know, as a Jeeper, that when you get to a corner or change, you try to keep that guy behind you in your rearview mirror.
Yeah, of course, that's a little bit different thing because you're worried about that guy breaking down and you get a long ways away from him before you realize it.
I four-wheeled with a lot of guys that don't understand that logic, and they've left me high and dry.
Welcome back to the TransAmerica Trail, Mike.
And good morning. Beautiful rolling hills country. Just forgotten how beautiful eastern Oklahoma is. Biking the Trans-American Trail.
Let me cross before you get on this, okay?
Oh yeah, I'm gonna wait till you get all the way across.
Ranch. Gassed up in Dewey and am headed back to the TransAmerica Trail. Mike decided this would be a good place for him to bail out and head on back. So now I am traveling by myself. And I am turning back on the TransAmerica Trail. this is marked no trespassing. It just goes for a couple of miles. I'm just going to stay on the paved road and miss out on this. Probably something kind of neat back there, but don't want to violate somebody's private property rights. Where that no trespassing route comes out is just right up here on the right. I'm going to pull over and see if it is also signed. I'm just curious. So I'm going to go ahead and go backwards until I run into a no trespassing sign, or what appears to be private property. I think I'm getting too close to that property that's marked. I'll turn around. The route is designed for the paper charts that they use. So it could be that there's some special sign over here that says no trespassing except cat riders. I don't know. Oh, look at the goats.
I've turned on a road that looks like it'll take me right back out to the highway instead of continuing on in here where I might end up on that private property. I don't want to do that.
Just check out about half of that route that was marked no trespassing. Coming from the other side, it was not marked, and it was obviously a public road. It provided access to multiple people's homes. So a boy is driving his cattle with that truck and trailer. He's got a horse inside of it. Yeah, this gives a pretty good idea what the trip could have looked like if we hadn't had all that rain this year. There's a scissor-tail flycatcher, female. We got a buzzard there. Dead armadillo. Looking for a shady wide spot where I can stop and have a little snack. Narrow wide spot, isn't it? armadillo. Maybe. Just reopened it. A four-wheel drive. Let's see. Yeah, it's just a little bit of water. A little gun shy after my crankshaft position indicator problem, so I'm going to take this very slowly. And I won't stop the engine for a while. Crossing the interstate. I don't want that beat on. You never can tell what you'll find along the tab. Yeah, you guys have the right idea in there. Lake Hudson. Just exited the Tat and am headed toward Natural Falls State Park. I arrived at Natural Falls State Park, hastily set up camp, then hiked out to the waterfalls. It had been a great trip. The trail, the side trips, the scenery and historical stops, and most especially Mike's company. Oklahoma is truly more than straight roads over flat terrain with boring scenery. Find the right company and come check it out for yourself. Hello everybody, and welcome back to my studio. I hope you enjoyed the video series. We had a lot of fun driving the trip and taking all the side trips, and I want to talk to you a little bit about coming to Oklahoma and just a couple of other things. So I have a few notes here. Pardon me while I look at it. The first thing I want to talk to you about is, I'm going to call it responsible driving. Several things. First off, I had some druthers about some of the muddy roads we were going on. I don't like to go out and tear up roads, public roads. These aren't parks. These are roads people use to do jobs, to get back and forth to their homes. And so sometimes we took a couple of bypasses here and there. You might hear it alluded to a little bit in the video. And one of them allowed us to go to Wichita, which was really cool. I'll come back to that in a minute. But if you're out here driving on these roads, just remember these are public roads. They're not your local OHV park where you can go in there and just have a blast tearing things up. So do try to be as careful as you can. We did see plenty of road graders, actually, several of them. And so the counties are doing a good job of keeping the roads up. And in some way there might be some regret. Some of you are probably out there saying, oh, it makes it easy. Well, it does make it easier. I can't deny that. Another issue is a lot of people live near these roads out in these rural areas. And so it wasn't too much dust during our trip because there was so much rain. But sometimes you go out there and these roads are dry and you kick up a lot of dust. And I'm sure the people who live in the homes that are near the roads appreciate it if you slow down a little bit around their home. Also, you'll see occasionally some signs, and whether they have signs or not, there may be kids in the area who are not used to a lot of traffic on these roads because it is pretty rural. And so they probably don't see a vehicle every couple hours. Of course, they'll hear you coming forever. And then the final thing I want to mention about responsible driving is you saw several times in the video slowing down, talking about intersections. It's almost like the state of Oklahoma is gridded the entire state every mile with a road, which isn't far from the truth. And a lot of those intersections don't have stop signs, and a lot of them are blind. So just be careful out there, and because if you're proceeding through, assuming you can do 35 through the intersection and nobody's coming, and there's another guy coming the other way and perpendicular to you at 35 miles per hour, assuming he can go through because these roads are so little used, you have the potential to have a major accident, especially if you're riding a motorcycle. You would not want to be hit by some farmer in his Ram pickup truck doing 35 miles an hour. I want to talk a little bit about drones. I did use the drones a little bit in the videos. And just a couple of points to bring up. In order to use them in state parks, you have to have permission from some superintendent in Oklahoma City, I guess. And I did not secure that. I didn't request it. So that was my fault. I was a little bit late learning about the rules for that, and wasn't able to pursue that with other things that I had going on in my life. There weren't any in the state parks, and I wasn't sure about the Corps engineer areas, and so we avoided at Call Lake and at Fort Supply. We avoided using the drones there as well. But we did use them when we got out on the rural roads. But what I want to warn you about is, in the state of Oklahoma, the Oklahoma State Legislature has passed, and the governor has signed into law, that if a drone is flying over your private property and you don't like it, you can shoot it down. So, now, is that legal? Who has jurisdiction over the air? Well, I thought the FAA did. But I did not want to be the test case for some angry farmer shooting down my drone. And I certainly did not want to lose my drone. So I would just recommend, if you're going to use a drone, avoid areas around people's homes, around their livestock, and just be careful about how you use it. You'll notice that where we used our drones, there just wasn't anybody around. And then you won't have any issue at all because there's nobody to complain. If you really want a drone shot where somebody is, say there's a rancher working out there or something like that, then maybe talk to them and say, hey, listen, I've got a drone. Do you mind if I fly it around this area? I've done that before, just because I wanted to get a couple areas, and not in this video series, but during another part of the TAT when Ray and I were together. The pandemic, of course, is overriding in all of this video series, and Mike and I discussed that before we even got together for the trip, and then we discussed, as you saw at the very, very beginning in day one, where I asked Mike if he was okay if we didn't wear the face mask while we were outside, that we just maintained a good distance. And you see us try our best to model the current pandemic procedures, and so that's what I want to say. What we're learning about the pandemic, what we, being the planet, is learning about the pandemic changes every day. And so the procedures, the safety measures, all of that is changing. So I'm not citing our video as a model of what you should be doing if you're driving in this pandemic, God forbid, in 6 months, a year, 2 years, I don't know. But do stay current on what responsible agencies are saying. The other thing I want to bring up is sometimes you're traveling through places that have not been very affected by the pandemic. And as a consequence, those people are still living lives like we were a year ago, and as if the pandemic doesn't exist, because it doesn't for them. And B, you could be the person that makes it exist for them if you're not careful. You don't want to be the person that goes into some remote farm community and brings COVID-19 into that community, and then they have an outbreak. So you're excited to take your own Tad, Oklahoma trip, which is great. And what I want to say is, what really made a big difference for us, I think, from the people who just drive the TAT only straight across Oklahoma, was we took a lot of side trips. And we visited some special places that none of them were more than about a half-hour drive off the TAT itself. And we found interesting ways to take those drives as best as we could. As a consequence, we were able to go out to Little Sahara and play on the sand dunes. We visited the Sod House Museum. We saw some waterfalls. And that made the trip a lot more fun, I think. There are some side trips that would be really neat that we did not take. And they include the Pioneer Women's Museum in Ponca City, Woolaroc in Pawhuska, Boiling Springs State Park, which I did stop at on the drive out. I was trying to get some information on the park pass. I'll talk about that in a couple minutes. Alabaster Caverns is the largest gypsum cave in the country. There's also wild caving there, so if you are interested in that, you might want to check that out. So you want to go to the state park, so you're supposed to make your reservations online for that. I took care of all that online before I left the house. You can take care of it while you're there, of course, but it's more difficult. So you can also go into the visitor center there and take care of it. But the problem is the visitor centers typically close at 4 o'clock, so you have to get there pretty early in the day. Better to arrive with a reservation. And when you do arrive with a reservation, you may find somebody, as we did one night, is camped in your site. We had been warned that he was there. So we called the visitor center and we let them know that we were just going to change sites. It was the easiest solution. And he was unaware that you could make online reservations and that somebody could have reserved that when he decided to spend just an extra night there. Some of the state parks require a parking pass. As you arrive in those parks, they have placards up that tell you a phone number to call and a code to put in, actually a phone number to text, and a code to put in, and then you can pay, I think it's $10 for the pass. The problem is you have to have phone service, and I'll come back to phone service in just a minute. If you have a camping permit, then one vehicle is covered, except we were told unless it's an out-of-state vehicle. So you'd think, well, Mark, then your vehicle could be covered and Mike would pay for his pass. Well, that's not exactly how it works either, because I'm 70 years old. If you're older than 65 and you're an Oklahoma resident, then you don't have to pay. You get a free parking pass for the year. And the way you do that is you go to the State Park Visitor Center and they'll help you make arrangements for that. And so I have both my Gladiator and my Wrangler now registered, and I can park in the state parks without having to pay. So we did take care of it with Mike when we got to those parks, but even there, we talked at the visitor centers, and some of the parks are kind of, we're kind of not enforcing that right now. And so they were, and then others were saying, well, okay, maybe out of state, go ahead and just use the camping pass. So it's kind of fluid right now exactly how they're enforcing all that. It is a new program. It literally started just a couple months ago, so I think the people out there at the parks are still learning exactly how they're going to implement all this. As for cell service, pretty sure Mike had Verizon, and I definitely have T-Mobile. And I definitely didn't have a lot of T-Mobile service when I was on this trip. There were a few places, and that was good. But there was a lot of places I did not have service. And even Mike with Verizon was having trouble having service in some places. So that's worth noting because A, if you want to take care of these parking passes and these campsite reservations, and B, we really want to look at a radar picture a couple of nights, and neither of those nights were we able to get a decent radar picture. So we were kind of stuck. Well, speaking of looking at a radar picture, if you're going to come to Oklahoma, be prepared for whatever weather could possibly come up. We had some pretty wild stuff, and that's a little bit unusual. It made the trip a lot more interesting. It gave us some fun roads to drive. But just be prepared for whatever possibilities you could expect for Oklahoma. Something else I want to mention, that little Sahara. We went out on the dunes and we played around and everything else. And we went down to the far end of the park. That's where we've been advised to go by Mark, who was camped right next to us. He was familiar with the dunes. He says, yeah, go along, he called it Broadway, the back road, all the way down to the far end of the park, and then work your way back up. And that's what we did. The trouble was we couldn't find our way out. It's easy to get lost out there. And Mike was like, well, I should have turned on breadcrumbs. And I was like, I should have just recorded where we went in here on my Nexus 7, but I had turned the recording off once we arrived in the park. So just, if you're going to go out there and play in the dunes, and if you've got a GPS, go ahead and let that thing record your route or turn on breadcrumbs so that you could easily find the exit. It took us about 15, 20 minutes before we finally found our way out. Still shots versus video shots. You're probably wondering why I didn't have much video at Wakita, and so I'm going to whine a little bit here. I used to, in a past life, for a living, design software. I wasn't the person who coded the software, I was the person that helped determine what the user system interface was. And this software was critical that it be easy to use and not confuse people, because it was software used to tell fighter pilots where to drop bombs, Army people where to position themselves when A-10s were flying overhead, this kind of thing. You didn't want any mistakes, so we had to be very careful. Well, my phone is used to control some of the features on the DJI drone. And so when I want to record with the DJI drone, there's a big red dot that I press that button and it turns to a small red dot, which means it's recording. And on very rare occasions, I use my phone to record video. It's less intimidating, and it just happened to be that when we looked in the Twister Museum, we saw Dorothy in there, and I was like, oh, I really would like to get a little bit of video of Dorothy. So for some reason, when I picked up the phone, I had it recording, and I looked at it and thought it wasn't recording, because on the phone, when I'm recording, it has a big red dot, and when I'm not recording, it has a small red dot, which is the exact opposite of what the drone does. Now remember, both apps are being used on the same phone, but they used opposite indications. And so what happened was, I put the camera up there to record Dorothy, and then I hit the dot thinking that I was going to start recording, and I was stopping recording. And then when I hit the dot again to stop the recording, I'm walking around carrying the phone in my hand or sticking it in my pocket with the recording on. And so I have a lot of recording of me swinging the camera around as I'm just walking around. And the only thing I got were those still shots, which were actually just the very first framing shot of the video, because as soon as I hit that dot, I dropped the camera down and started walking around, and that's all I got on the video. So almost near the end of the list, we used GMRS radios during the trip. That's probably pretty obvious there where you hear us using the call signs. GMRS do require a license. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on it. I'm just going to say you get better performance out of GemRes radios than you do out of CB. I just would encourage everybody, the rules for GemRes have changed, the capabilities of the radios have changed. I would just encourage everybody, move over to GemRes from CB. Get your buddies to move over to GemRes. So the last thing is the crankshaft position sensor. You saw that caused a couple of problems during the trip. I have replaced it. It was a 10-minute job. So hopefully won't have any more problems with that. So that about wraps it up. It was a wonderful trip. I hope maybe some of you look at it and say, geez, I need to come to Oklahoma, and you actually make that happen. And maybe you get a few ideas from this video. Thank you very much for all the comments. I really appreciate that. Go out there, be safe, explore your world.